In the sandy flats of tidal areas, when the tide is out, you can often see many little jumping fish hopping about. There are also frogs around. These creatures are clearly fish, yet they have developed legs and hop around on the beach. Quite an odd sight. These are mudskippers. Although they are fish, they spend most of their time living on land, on mudflats, in swamps, and in intertidal zones. They may look a bit like fish, or even like the Chinese giant salamander, which was mentioned in connection with lobsters earlier. But in biological classification, they belong to the phylum Chordata, class Actinopterygiae, ray-finned fishes, order Gobiformes, family Oxudercidae, genus Periophthalmus. They are genuine fish, not amphibians. Their pelvic fins have fused into a sucker-like disc that allows them to prop up the front half of their body. One thing is certain, you won't find them high and dry like stranded whales or dolphins. Looking ahead to future whale falls, these little fish have evolved several useful adaptations. Frogs also rely partly on their skin for breathing, which means the skin must stay moist. If it dries out, breathing becomes difficult. Mudskippers are often seen rolling around on the mud, or suddenly lying flat for no apparent reason. This is exactly how they keep their skin moist enough to breathe properly. Their mouths are also unusually large. They can take a big mouthful of water and use the oxygen in it for breathing. Once that oxygen is used up, they find a puddle and take another mouthful. They can hold their breath for a while, but eventually they have to come up for air. Mudskippers essentially do the reverse of what most fish do. The lining of their mouth and throat can also exchange gases, but only while kept moist. For now, they still cannot completely leave the water behind, even though they clearly prefer life on land. So how does a fish walk once it has come ashore? Simply flopping around like a whale is nowhere near enough. At the very least, it needs something more like a sea lion's gait. Mudskippers have extremely well-developed pectoral muscles, an adaptation for life on land. They have even evolved joints suitable for walking, including both elbow and shoulder joints, so they can crawl quite naturally. They use a crutch walking method. The pelvic fins push up for support, the pectoral fins take a step, and they keep shuffling forward this way. As a result, mudskippers can move quite nimbly on land. They can also climb. Using their sucker-like pelvic fins, they can cling to rock faces or tree trunks. Mudskippers are not only walking fish, they are climbing fish, which is truly impressive. By arching their bodies and pushing off with their tails, they can leap dozens of centimeters at a time. This ability is very useful in their environment. Mudskippers often have striking spots on their dorsal fins. When some of them raise those fins, the display looks almost like the wings of a fierce dragon. Quite imposing. The fins become brighter and fuller. These are features used to attract females. Males get especially frustrated because their throats have almost no chance to show off. That is why male mudskippers came up with the idea of flinging themselves into the air. In addition to displaying the throat, the higher they jump, the healthier they appear. They perform courtship dances to attract potential mates. In the end, the scene often turns into two males opening their mouths as wide as possible and roaring at each other. Basically a contest of who looks more intimidating. How the winner is decided is unclear. Maybe the first one to stop roaring loses. The victorious male then leads the female into a burrow he has previously dug, so they can complete the important business of fish life. Because their bodies are no longer well suited for swimming, mudskippers are quite clumsy in the water. Their eyes see clearly on land, but become blurry underwater, making high tide a dangerous time when they must hide from predators. Their relatives, the gobies, are stuck in the water and can only watch enviously as mudskippers crawl out and spit out mouthfuls of water. Truly an inspirational sight. Their burrows have both vertical and curved sections. Even when the tide rises, the tunnels do not fill completely with water. There is always an air-filled chamber that remains suitable for living. Mudskippers are clearly determined to live on land. They lay their eggs in these air-filled rooms, and the male then fertilizes them. After that, the male takes full responsibility for care. He fills his mouth with air at the entrance, carries it inside, and spits it into the chamber, acting as a living air exchange fan, one mouthful at a time. It is hard work. Mudskippers have no tongues. In water, this is no big deal because fish simply suck food in along with water and then filter the water out. The water itself helps them swallow. On land, however, try swallowing a biscuit without a tongue. It is not easy. A tongue is essential. If they had a long, sticky tongue like a frog's, that would be ideal. Instead, mudskippers solve the problem by holding a mouthful of water, approaching the food,
spitting the water out to wrap around it, then instantly sucking the water and the food back in. Swallowing and everything else is accomplished in one smooth motion. The differences between aquatic and terrestrial vertebrates remain clear. In 2016, a research team from the Department of Biological Sciences at the New Jersey Institute of Technology published a paper on another remarkable fish called the cave anglerfish, or similar climbing cave fish. The name given is Crepus totora thamicola, likely referring to a species such as Cryptotora thamicola, the waterfall climbing cave fish. Because it lives in perpetual darkness, it has little color. Its fins function rather like limbs, allowing it to grip and climb. Its crawling gait is almost identical to that of many four-legged land animals. Researchers suggest this may offer clues to how fish first climbed onto land and began the transition toward amphibians. There are also air-breathing fish. Only 6 species of lungfish still exist in the world. They have largely lost the ability to breathe underwater with gills, so every half hour or so they must surface for air, otherwise they would drown. A fish that can drown in water is certainly peculiar. During the dry season, the African lungfish burrows into the drying riverbed,
surrounds itself with a mucus cocoon, and enters a long period of dormancy. How long it sleeps depends on the length of the dry season, anywhere from a few months to several years. Roughly 375 million years ago, a fish called Tiktaalik that lived in shallow waters evolved traits better suited to its environment. Because oxygen levels in shallow water were relatively low, organs that could help it breathe air directly gave it a survival advantage. These were the beginnings of lungs. At the same time, the bones and muscles supporting its fins grew stronger. These fish could even crawl onto land to escape danger in the water. It is precisely because creatures like Tiktaalik began exploring life on land more than 300 million years ago that we eventually have the diversity of terrestrial vertebrates we see today, including ourselves. Looking back, Tiktaalik holds special significance for humanity. This is one of the most fascinating chapters in the history of life on Earth. As for the climbing fish and their relatives, who knows whether, a few million years from now, some lineage of these crutch-walking creatures might give rise to something new.